Hi everyone and welcome along. I'm so excited today because we're painting the beautiful magnolia flower that blooms on a tree and looks absolutely resplendent this time of year. So grab your paints and let's get started. So we're going to begin with a little bit of a pencil sketch. If you haven't already had a look at my sort of materials test all about which pencils are the best ones to use for sketching underneath watercolour, then I highly recommend you go and have a look at that. So this is a bit of a weird shape I've drawn. Basically I'm going to do a nice big open flowered magnolia down here, so I don't want too much there, but what I do want to do is just put in a little curl there, which is going to show me the way in which my flower is going to open. Then I want a little curve, which is just going to be the base of my semi-open magnolia flower, and then we're going to have a few buds coming off here. So I'm going to begin with my open flower because that is a real main event here, and you'll notice I've got a few of my new brushes and I've got a really large Pro Art connoisseur brush, which is still rounded point, but it is in the size 12, and links to everything are in the episode notes. And there's also this long slender brush called a rigger brush, which has lovely long bristles for a technique we need a little bit later on. But to start off with, I am going to pick up a little bit of Alizarin Crimson, or Alizarin Crimson, or Alizarin Crimson, depending on your preference of how to say it, and I am going to begin by painting in the base of some petals on the magnolia one. So I am going to begin, and this is a sort of interesting thing. We have 6 petals around a magnolia, and they are sort of a beautiful pink blend, but they are largely white, and it's a very specific type of blend. The colour is very intense at the base of the petal and then spreads up in a kind of stringy blend. And I've found the best way to do this is by starting off each petal with, let me see, so I'm going to begin by coming from just here, and I've got this kind of circle on my page, this little curve, and I'm just doing some quite sort of strong Alizarin Crimson at the base, and I'm going to leave that there. It looks a bit peculiar, but it's because I'm getting my size 12 rounded point brush, which is a bit like a mop brush, I suppose, and I've got it wet, but I'm now going to sort of dry it off on the bristles a bit and dry it off on here. I don't want it sopping wet, and what we're going to do is we're going to create the petal shape by just, there we go, touching it up and coming back down with a little bit more water. It's just hard to get the balance of how much water you need on your brush, because we want to essentially get these nice sort of slightly uneven stringy blends, but we also don't want too much dry brushing, so we can just go back in one more time and just smooth down that petal. But I'm pretty pleased with that petal. Lovely. So that is looking probably a bit invisible on the page at the moment, but as the colour and water dries, we're going to see a beautiful broad petal with these nice sort of spread up bits of pink. Okay, so I want to do 3 petals, and I'm going to do one here now. So the 3 petals are sort of covering the circumference of this circle with this bit of colour. And then I get my wet brush, just dry it off a little bit, and then there we go, and come back down. Beautiful. It doesn't matter if you get any colour in that central circle, because that is going to be filled in with pink itself in a little bit. And then to finish off, going to begin that petal, because magnolia flowers have this rather sort of striking centre to them, and they all sort of wrap themselves around this domed centre. Okay, and last petal to a point, and then bring it back down just to catch the colour, and that's beautiful. And we want that kind of strange blend. And if you find you've got too much water on the page, there's a little bit of puddling there, we can just, with a fairly dabbed off brush, you can just very gently do a little bit of tidying up work. But I'm thrilled with the beginning of that. And now, whilst we let that dry, we can look at our petals up here. So we're going to have a sort of magnolia flower that's a little bit more cupped. And what I'm going to do first is the petals in the background. So these are going to be much gentler and paler. So I'm going to mix up a very, very, very pale wash, and I'm going to put the tiniest bit of cadmium yellow in. And you saw that it was such a minimal amount. There we go, no more than that. Little bit of colour, and then plenty of water, because we want to see these background petals, but we don't want them to dominate proceedings. And also the colour on a magnolia, although we have got some colour in the centre here, really the main bout of colour comes from the exterior of the petals, which we're going to see on these here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do two little sort of S-curve, C-curve petals with my big mop brush, and then I'm just dabbing that off there, and I'm going to pick up the excess colour, the excess water, and that's pretty darn invisible, but it's exactly how we want it. And I might just do just a little one coming off there. Okay, again, those are going to dry, and we'll actually be able to see them, and you'll be able to actually believe that I do have a flower there. So yeah, we're going to let these dry and move on to the next stage. So we're going to now repeat those first steps with the petals on the open flower with 3 more. So we start with the sort of stronger Alizarin Crimson, then with a wet brush, pick up that colour, and then come back down to pick up the rest of it. And then if you want to do one more little reshaping petal stroke, then that's cool. And then I'm just going to pick up some of that excess colour. I just refreshed my bit of kitchen roll as well, because you really do end up soaking through that kitchen roll. When I'm putting the Alizarin Crimson down on the page here for these petals, I'm using it really quite concentrated, because we want a really strong amount down at the base. But in using this ginormous mop brush, and that it only just sort of touches that colour, results in a really interesting and very appropriate for a magnolia kind of blend. And again, I'm just going to remove the excess. It's looking lovely. And of course the petals underneath have dried fully, so they're keeping their shape and not getting too disturbed by what we're doing on top. It's not often you see a magnolia flower quite as open as this, so I thought it'd be nice for us to just see how we paint one, as well as the more familiar sort of closed cup shape. Right, really pleased with that. We're going to let that dry, and now we can get back to this, and we're going to now do some slightly more sort of similar techniques to what we've just been doing here for our closed cup flowers. So our flower is heading off in this direction, so I want to do a central petal that way, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start just a little bit higher than the base there, and I'm going to paint in some strong colour, just in a little soft V, and then I'm just going to move my water because I need the space. I am going to create a sort of light bulb shape petal, which is going to crisp up and become quite clear. But what I'm also going to do in the meantime is I'm going to take this rigger brush, I'm going to get some colour on it, and I am going to draw a line from top to bottom. And this is still wet, so what's going to happen is there's going to be a little bit of feathering out of this central line. And what's lovely is it's going to just start to spread out and become less defined, but it becomes quite sort of indicative of the sort of trademark magnolia veined petals. So I'm just doing a few extra from the top and bottom, and we'll just leave that be, let that dry. And we will now paint in 2 more to the side. And what the way a magnolia sits is you have a sort of central petal and then 2 more that sort of encase it. So we're going to get our pink under here. And this time this is going to sort of come from the side and curl up. And that time we don't need to sort of come back down, but I am going to pop in a little line with the rigger brush. Now you could do this with a fine pointed rounded point brush, but it's just so much easier to use the slender bristles to really help you get a lovely smooth line. One more time. And we can see there's a bit of a gathering of water at the top, so I'm just going to remove that with my brush. And a little rigger line. And these lines are so faint and it feels like they'll fade into insignificance, but they will just help a huge amount. And then what I want to do is just one extra little petal curving out. Which you've got to be really careful using the fine point of this brush, because it is a large brush. Lovely. And all of these petals that are looking so invisible at the moment are going to crisp up and become beautiful, delicate magnolia petals. And whilst these all dry, we can start to have a think about the stem. And the other thing is you can now, with a little brush, just go in and just tidy up if you need to, but don't do too much. We don't want to lose the charm of that beautiful natural blend that a brush and a human hand could only wish to replicate. Okay, so we need to now get our stems, and there's a beautiful bit of bright flashy green that we see in the sepals and also in the center of the open flower. So I've got some, I'm going to change my water actually, get some fresh water, because we're now using a complementary color from pink. So Sap Green, and I'm going to use a bit of lemon yellow. My poor lemon yellow is only ever used really in the context of adding it to green, so it always has this green tint to it. Just waking that up and flashing that into there. Really nice. And then in contrast, the actual branch of a magnolia, I like to really sort of contrast the pink and the bright green with a really dark shadowy branch. So I getting a little bit of shadow mixed up, but that leans on the brown side. So I've got my burnt sienna, and I mean, I often use Prussian Blue when I'm doing botanical shadow, but I'm actually using French ultramarine today because I like that slightly richer colour. Okay, right, so we can't see a huge amount of branch down here, but we can see a little bit. Excuse me. So with my size 4 brush, which is absolutely fine, I am going to start painting in. I'm going to just start it down here. A slightly kind of knobbly branch, and a lot of magnolias have sort of sprouting pieces coming off at all points, and we need to have a sense of a branch where this flower is coming from. And I also like to just add a tiny bit of Mars Black to these branches. I just feel it really helps the intensity. And if we carry on up, we really don't see much of it at all in the way I've drawn it, so I'm just going to cheat a little bit. So we'll see a little bit from behind there. We'll have a little bit of another sprouting branch, and then up it comes. There we go. Now when it comes up to a actual base of a flower, it's almost like a sort of scrunchy polar neck underneath the plant. Now I'm going to run a little risk of adding in this green when this is still wet, but I'm quite excited by that, so we're going to just pop that in there to make up the shape, and as long as you don't overly blend it, you're all good. And then down here we're going to have some that are still just leaves at this stage. The lovely thing, and I'm just going to do a bit, I can do a leaf that pops over the top of there. Put up in a bit more sap green at the base, and that is looking fantastic. And I think we'll give ourselves another little budding. Oh, let's actually have a bud here. Okay, this is exciting. So we haven't looked at buds yet. We're going to put 2 up there. I'm going to take just a little bit of Alizarin Crimson. And this time I don't need my big mop brush, but I'm going to use this brush in quite a sort of moppy way. I'm going to just squish it down, and then I'm going to just try not to touch too much, and then dropping in a dab of the solid Alizarin Crimson at the bottom. And this is the risky bit. I'm going to drop in some green, and just as long as you don't overwork it, that will look really nice. Okay, so I'm going to just fill in a few more buds up there, and then we'll come back and have a look at the centre. We're now coming to the detailed end of the piece. So I've got a size 2 brush, and just picking up some fairly concentrated Alizarin Crimson, and I have done a little dab of the green that is on our leaves and sepals here, and that's dried. And now what I'm going to do is create a sort of round dome in the middle of this flower by painting little curves in this strong concentrated Alizarin Crimson. I still need a little bit of wetness on the brush just to make the paint move in the way I want it to, but I need it fairly strong. So I'm just angling all my little curved brush strokes into the middle. And then I can get a little bit of Sap Green just to get just the tiniest bit of detail in the middle there. Lovely. Now, looking at the piece as a whole, it's got a lovely loose feel to it at the moment, which is great. We could add in a little bit of detail with some shadow. Because our branch is already very dark, any shadow we add to that will need to really sort of go for the very blue tones. And I've mixed up a bit of blue and black just to get some of that in there. And it can also help me just neaten up those edges where the branch meets the flowers. It's not too much, but it just does help elevate this piece from a completely loose one to something that's got a rather lovely charm that has the essence of the flower in it. If you wanted, and I would err on the side of caution here, I don't think there should be too much messing about with these flowers, but if you wanted to just define a little bit more of what's going on down at the base of that petal, just mix in a tiny bit of Alizarin Crimson into the shadow mix, and with a very small brush you can just define sort of which of those petals sits on top of the other. But as I said, don't do too much, it just doesn't need it. And then the same goes for just around the base. That central dome, and also just where the petals are coming out from the centre. So I'm just adding a tiny bit of shadow in those little corners where the petals that sit underneath. And just blending that out. And that just helps define the tiniest bit where your petals are sitting. And now I'm just going back through. And there we have a lovely spring magnolia. Thanks so much for watching. I want to say a big thank you to my patrons for your support, because your support enables me to keep creating these videos that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed that video, then hit the like button and comment below to let me know how you got on with that one. And if you subscribe, then you'll never miss another video. Until next time, bye!